Shalom Aleichem. Thanks for coming back, everybody. So last week, we finally broke into the beginning of Yesodei Torah, which is the first section of Sefer Amada, this work on Rambam's sort of philosophical approaches to everything, to Torah, the meaning of life, to the meaning of existence, to the way everything works, all these different things. So we began, first of all, with explaining philosophically how it makes sense that there's a Hashem, that there is God. And that the first thing that's required of a person is to know Hashem, where we talked about the difference between Yedias Hashem and Emunas Hashem. It's not about necessarily believing in Hashem, because that's sort of something that transcends the requirement to know him. Belief in him is first, but that's really sort of why would you be here were it not for that first prerequisite, right? Person is already locked in and at least believes in Hashem. Otherwise, what's the impetus for studying the halacha? And the further proof of that I explained was, if you're here for Shakla V'Tarya, if you're really just wanting to know, and somebody pointed out last week that it was in Korea that they learn Gemara because they know that there's a connection to, success with the Jewish people and our way of thinking. So they learn the Gemara, they learn Talmud over there because they respect our thought process. So Rambam is not where you go to understand thought process necessarily, or to understand, to think the way a Jew thinks. That's Gemara. And he even points out, I'm not here to bring Shakla V'Tarya. I'm here just to bring the halachas. And so really, if you're here, if you're at Mishnah Torah, you're at Mishnah Torah for the purpose of knowing how to live according to Torah, live according to Hashem, not much beyond that. Now, we obviously use it to look deeper, and we look, deeper into Rambam, and there's obviously layers when we're talking about somebody on such a high level as, first of all, the Rishonim in general, but especially Rambam, but Pshat, he really just wanted it to be learned the way, according to just the laying out the halachas. He was doing this incredible service to the Jewish people by laying out the laws, laying out the halachas. So one of the things in particular, when we looked at the Rambam, when we looked at the fact that it was knowing Hashem, it was the knowledge of Hashem that led to, this idea that we have to understand Hashem, know him as well as possible, because that's the first thing that leads to your approach throughout the rest of Torah. Not just your approach to life, but especially in your approach to the rest of the endeavor in Mishnah Torah. We're just doing Sefer Amada, the first book, but really the whole Mishnah Torah, all the halachas. When you're approaching studying Torah, you have to do so with the knowledge and understanding of Hashem as much as you can, right? With that as the foundation, as he says, then everything beyond that is just always with that nugget, with that kernel, that it's all rooted in Hashem. And as you go through, when you go through, you understand, you sort of recognize that there's a lot of halachas that seem, detailed, oriented, and, a lot of nuances and things like that. They could be maybe dry and some that may not be relevant because, again, the Rambam also was the only one to sort of compile all the halachas, even the ones that aren't shaykh right now, but the ones that were Zman Abayis, also lost lava in the time to come, when we with the third base of Mikdash, which should happen before we get off this call even. And we still learn it. And so when you have, on the forefront, in the back of your mind, really, that it's all because of Hashem and it's all rooted in Hashem, first of all, you have there's a different refinement. There's an edelkeit that comes with your approach to learning halacha and to following halacha. And that's why the very first thing we began last week was Yesod HaYesodes V'Amud HaChachmas, that the foundation of foundations and the pillar of wisdoms, that each one of those first letters, first of all, is saying the foundation of foundations and pillar of wisdom, but also the first letter of each one of those words spells out the Shem Havaya, the name of Hashem. So this is something that was very important because that's, the approach. So we went over the first three halachas, and I'm going into the fourth. Did we do the third? Yeah. So when he first introduced this idea of Hashem, and that he's the only true existence, and there's no other existence like his, and anything that exists only exists on behalf of being an offshoot of his existence, and that while all of existence is dependent on his existence or dependent on him for its own existence, the same could not be said about Hashem and anything else. So it's understanding the nature of Hashem. The idea is to really just kind of grasp this concept. But then he went up further to give scriptural proof of these ideas. First by saying, he says, "V'Hashem Elikim Emes," that Hashem, Hashem, God, is truth. And then later goes and then explains what he means by truth and how he's the only real truth. And then he brings the pasuk, the famous pasuk, Ein Oid Milvadai, there's nothing besides him. I heard in a shir that there was points out something interesting, that first he begins with the Navi, and then the later scriptural proof is the one from Mikra, from Torah. And it's just interesting, because he doesn't first, that by the Navi, it's explained like this. When we look at, when we learn the, in Parshas Yisro, and we hear about the Aseret Dibros, the coming down, and Hashem comes down and gives us the 10 Commandments, and we don't necessarily, we get a glimpse of what's going on, what the experience was like. But the Haftarah we read is Yechezkel. We read about the Meiser Merkava. We read about the chariot and the vision, the vision and the divine, coming down in that experience. What's interesting, it's noted in Chassidus that Yechezkel is one of the later Nevi'im, which suggests that he's, who am I, but dare I say, one of the lesser of the Nevi'im. He came later. In the concept, I think he was also, Chutz La'aretz. And I think the idea there was the fact that he goes into deep descriptions of the vision, the chariot. That's, by the way, why we read it in Parshas Yisro, is because the Haftarah is directly addressing that experience, because by Har Sinai, the chariot came down, Hashem came down. We had that experience, but it doesn't discuss it. So we grabbed a Haftarah that does go into a little bit of that. And it's interesting that Chassidus brings that the fact that he goes into the details shows actually sort of a removal. There's less of, when you experience something so intimately, you don't necessarily get caught up by the details. You're just in the experience. I often have, my father lives in France, and he often gets not upset, but he tells me, he says, you need to send me more pictures. I don't have enough pictures of my grandchildren. And I tell him, I'm often when I see a time that I should be taking a picture, I don't want to move my eyes. I don't want to look down, grab my phone. I don't think about it because I'm just in the experience. Right. So Yechezkel, not to really, compare it exactly, but just Lamashal, that was him describing all of the details, was like taking a photograph of the experience. And it's sort of a removal of that intimacy of the experience of just being, right? And so by the Navi, he says, V'Hashem Elikim Emes, there's this, he's explicitly saying Hashem, Elohim, these are detailed, Hashem is a name of God, Elohim is a name of God, names are in them of themselves, sort of not limiting, but names are only relevant so far as they are necessary for something outside of the individual, right? You only need a name so that others can identify you. If you were by yourself, it was just you in the world, there'd be no need for a name. So already by the time we mention a name, any name of Hashem, we're already talking like bringing it down a little bit, And when it comes to the Torah, again, it's a little bit more vague in style, but it says it all by saying Ein Oid Milvada. It doesn't even say, it says him. Ein Oid Milvada. There's nothing else, there's nothing besides him. Right? It's more vague, which means it's a little bit more closely intimately related to Hashem. So he goes on to give that scriptural, to give those psukim to show the evidence for the concept that he described before, and then goes on further. And so when he says, there is no mitzias, there's no thing in existence that exists quite like him, if that makes sense, right? When it says that his Einoid Mavadai, and this is an extension to what it said by the Navi about his truth, that he is truth, it means that there is no true existence like there is Hashem. And we go on to Halacha Hey, that says, Hamatzoi Hazeh, Hu Eleka Ha'elam, Aden Kol Ha'aretz, that this being, Hashem, is, when it says Eleka Ha'elam, the God of the world. The word Elohim, I think I said this once before, that Elohim is Gematria HaTeva, that the word Elohim is the same numerical value as the word HaTeva, which means nature. So when we think of all of existence as being HaTeva, that nature, the universe, however you want to describe it, I saw somebody, a friend of mine posted a meme that said they're replacing, like in I think secular culture, maybe he says they're replacing the word prayer with the word manifest, and they're replacing the word God with universe. And I find that I hear that a lot, right? To manifest these thoughts, the universe will, put that out in the universe. And it's really, you're describing prayer to Hashem, but using this new kind of, this new terminology. And I can appreciate what they're saying, but I also appreciated the meme. It kind of brought that to light, the fact that this is a cheapening of what's necessary. To daven to Hashem, to pray to Hashem, to recognize that Havaya Hu Ha-Elokim, if Elohim is nature or the universe, then we say that by saying that Hamatzoi Hazeh, that this being, Havaya, Hashem, right, as we said, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the four-letter name of God, Hashem himself, Ein Oid Milvadai, then when we say that this entity that is, there's nothing else but him, and he is the only true existence, then Eleka Ha'elam means that the nature of the world or the universe is Hashem, that he is the life force and the nature and the existence of existence, if that makes sense. And therefore, Aden Kol Ha'elam, or Aden Kol Ha'aretz, rather, sorry. He is the master, the leader, right? We say Rabbanu Shel Olam, that he is the Lord, he's the master of the world. If he is all of existence, he is the nature of the entire universe, then he obviously is the master and controller of the world and all that happens within it. And he says, V'hu hamanhig hagalgo, and he rotates the universe, right? Then in order for something to exist, there has to be zman and makom, there has to be time and space. And within that exists the fact that things have to be in constant motion, that there's things developing. And there are several types. We have the idea of ratzo and shov, of like pulse or breath in and out, but there's also the continuous motion. That's something that exists, and think time is specifically relegated to orbit, things of that nature. So when he says that Vahu Hamanhig Galga, he is the one who is rotating the rotation of the universe. But with an infinite power. He's able to do this with an infinite power, and it says, there's no stop. There's no pause in this continuous perpetual motion. Shahagalgal save of Tamid, because this the what's the other, the universe, but then there's also the what's the specific to what we're in. The galaxy is in constant motion, and he is the one that keeps it in motion, that put it in motion. And how could something be in motion by itself? Something had to put it in motion. So not only did something create existence, but then that creator is also the one that put the creation in motion, which is how existence develops and things continue to unfold. And he causes this motion without a hand and without a body. So what does that mean? When we notice, when we pay attention, we look at the world, we look at the motion of the universe, and even now that we have the ability to actually, look with telescopes and whatnot, we can see that there's no physical force forcing or causing this revolving, this motion to occur. There's no physical thing that's doing it. So it shows the omnipresence, the fact that Hashem is the controller of and also the life force of all of existence and the universe, the entire universe. If the thing that is in motion, this world is in motion, the universe is in motion, and it was put into motion, and we don't see the tangible involvement, but it's still continuously going. This is where our concept differs from many other cultures' concept of Hashem, where they believe that Hashem created and then he bounced, right? He put a whole system in place, everything just kind of runs on its own, and then he checked out, he left. And every now and then he'll check back in, split the sea, and then he's back, he disappears again, right? But in reality, we're able to see the fact that it's constantly in motion, that Hashem continues to revolve and keep the world in motion and is forever involved in that unfolding of and development of existence and time and experience and life. So that's why we say hashgacha pratis, that his intervention, his divine intervention, is constant. It's everything, everywhere, all the time. And he goes on, he says, v'yedias davar zeh, and the knowledge of this idea, this concept, that is a mitzvah aseh, is a positive command. So all of what we've gone up to until this point, this is the introduction. This is the first mitzvah that's actually being introduced here, right? We finally get to the first mitzvah. The knowledge of all that we've said up until this point is a mitzvah aseh, shene'emar anochi Hashem Elokecha. Mitzvah says, I am God, Hashem Elokecha, your God. There's chassidus I could bring into that, but I'll probably come back to that idea. But anochi Hashem Elokecha. This doesn't sound like a mitzvah, but it's the first of the 10 commandments. And it's for this reason that the Rambam really starts with this mitzvah. He starts with the concept leading up to this mitzvah and explaining and prefacing with the idea of Hashem and knowing and having this awareness of him as the precursor to all mitzvahs, and then shows this is the first mitzvah. This is the first one that Hashem said. Now, obviously, if you're going through the order in the Torah, there's Pru Urvu, there's Bris Milah, there's different mitzvahs that came beforehand, at least they were introduced in this order. But he's saying that this is really, all the mitzvahs, for example, we say by bris, we call it the bris of Abraham, but we don't do the bris because of what happened with Abraham. We do the bris because Hashem told us to by Har Sinai. He gave it in the Torah as a mitzvah. So Abraham Avinu did it, and his sons did it up until that point because it was the mark of the covenant. So it still is the covenant, but we do it. It happened because it was the covenant, but also we do it more importantly, because Hashem said so in the Torah. So if that's what we're basing the listing of the mitzvahs, and of course, but Rambam's, in the Mishnah Torah and his Sefer HaMitzvahs, that by starting with this is the first mitzvah, because this is the foundation of foundations, and the pillar of all wisdom is to know this, and to know Hashem, and to know Anochi Hashem Elikacha, that Hashem is your God. And anybody who could fathom or an error to possibly think chas v'shalom that there was something else besides Hashem, that they transgress the second mitzvah, which Hashem said to not have any other gods before you. And any person who makes this mistake and errs in this way is not just over alav. They're not just missing. They're not just transgressing a mitzvah leisaseh. They're missing the entire point, right? They're disconnected from the ikr, from the entire point of what's going on, of life, of the world, of Hashem, and understanding and God. They remove themselves from this foundation. So Elokazeh Echadhu, this God, right, is one. Hashem is one. He's not two or more than two. He's a one. He is one. And he's a one unlike any other existent thing can be one. His oneness is a unique type of oneness. And there's no other existent thing and no other entity that we can properly, use as a mashal to explain the oneness of Hashem. And again, we use, we have to use terminology in the way of shlila, where we're explaining what something is by explaining what it isn't. We have to sort of indirectly discuss and describe or use things and get as close as possible and say like this, but definitely not that. Right? That's sort of what we have to do to build this understanding of Hashem. This is loy echad kamin. Sorry, loy echad kamin. Shahu kalu achodim harbet. That he's not. His oneness is not like another oneness that might be a singular entity, a single thing that has moving pieces, that has other, that has pieces to it, right? Like a body. Right? His oneness is not like any other oneness, and not even like a oneness we often say like a body, right? We often use this mashal to explain Hashem or to explain our relationship with Hashem, that Hashem is that there's like a body, it's one, but there's pieces. No, we don't say this about Hashem, right? When it comes to Hashem, he's not even like a body, where a body is one body with different pieces to it. We can't even say that, because Hashem, his oneness is like no other. And so because of that, we can't use this mashal. We can't use this example. Now, one of the things in Kabbalah, for example, is we might dive into different names of Hashem to elicit a different energy expressed by Hashem. And one of the reasons why it says that the Baal Shem Tov said not to study Kabbalah, I didn't see it inside, but what I heard in a shir, that the reason he said this was that people who don't understand it properly could err and think chas v'shalom that there are pieces. And the Rambam says here beferish that you can't even approach the idea of Hashem and understanding him in all of his nuance, even though we say that everything is there's nothing else besides him. We can't use the mashal that like a body. We can't say anything that has any type of oneness to sort of, portray or display or illustrate God's oneness. So even though we use these kind of concepts, it doesn't fit, it doesn't work. But on the reverse, we can also understand that the reason, we might be inclined to do so is because there is so much nuance in creation, right? I feel like an independent existence from another individual or from this table, right? There is division. So if we see things in that way, in that manner, it's hard to sort of grasp that understanding. But what's important to note is that since there is no oneness like Hashem's oneness, and Einoid Milvado, there's nothing else besides him, then we have to understand that in a sense, in a way, we don't exist independently from Hashem. The table doesn't exist independently from Hashem, right? If Hashem is one and everything is not, you can't chas v'shalom say that anything is separate from Hashem, because there are no two, right? He said, Eina lo shnayim v'lo yaser al shnayim. It's not two. Hashem is not two or more than two. So even though we see nuance in existence and nuance in creation, and obviously there's a lot in Chassidus that touches on this concept, but I'll stop on this point, on this halacha. So halacha Zayin, ending with this idea that Hashem is one, truly one, and so much so that we have to say that nothing else is separated from him. In fact, in the Gemara, when it uses the language to say, just passed, but when it uses the language to explain this idea, the concept of idol worship, of avodah zara, which is the sort of this problem that Rambam is saying, that a person that might err and think that there's a possibility for separation, you could err in thinking this way, that it refers to it as kitzas benatius, of chopping or cutting the plants, because just like a plant is rooted in the earth, so too all of existence, anything that exists in this physical or spiritual worlds, exist as an extension, as an offshoot from the true existence, which is Hashem. So any kind of placing of any importance or power or anything like that to a created being, whether that created being be physical in this world or even a spiritual being which is created by Hashem, thinking of it or giving it any kind of power is this idea of cutting or removing or severing the plant, just like you cut a plant and remove it from its root. And so too, this is the same idea. So this is how important it is to understand God and the oneness of Hashem, and not to make the mistake that there could be anything that exists outside of this oneness of Hashem. And we'll go into that a little bit more. Sure.
What you just mentioned about the, cutting from a plant, is this like what happened in the Pardes, in the Gemara Hagiga?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, it mentions it elsewhere, but that's the famous one by Acher. He came back not b'shalom, and that was what happened with him. So yeah, nice, good reference, good point. That's exactly it. All right. So we got through Zion.
I had to add something. I just learned recently that
please.
Echad is numerical value is 13, which is the same as I believe is ahava, like love, and 13 corresponding to the attributes of Hashem, and Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. I realized that connection today.
Nice. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, there's a lot with 13, from the idea of 13, and with I won't go into it here, but yeah, there's a lot on that. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yashar Koach. Yeah, 13. Yeah, the 13 attributes of mercy are beyond the world. They exist with Hashem, and 13, beautiful.
I've kind of like
everybody. What do you say?
I have like a tongue-in-cheek kind of question going off of that.
Yeah.
But like 13 and 13 would make 26, right? So would one love be a name of Hashem? Like, because it's still
I like that.
Gematria 26.
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Like, he had, whatever, like there's fixed like names, but just like a funny idea. That's not a coincidence, obviously, you know.
There's
So
no such thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great board. That's a great board. Yeah. Yasher koach. All right, I appreciate that. All right, so I'll see everybody next week. I'm gonna